You guys might not care about this, but producer Rolly and I, we're good friends with the Vikings host here at Chat Sports, Patrick Seatman. We've been jockeying back and forth, and they have retaken the lead in the sub-race to 13,000. That ends now. Let's beat the Vikings channel, help Rolly and I out, take down Patrick Seatman. He's off this week, so there's no content going on over there. We can pass him. The time is now. Now that I'm done giving my 300 speech to have you guys subscribe, let's talk about the Falcons potentially trading for Courtland Sutton. So Sutton was a player who was in a lot of trade circles during free agency in the draft, and things have died down a little bit, but with June 1st right around the corner, you might see some post-June 1 activity. So the Broncos could be looking to move the wide receiver because they drafted Marvin Mims with their first selection in this past draft. And the Falcons absolutely could stand to add another wide receiver, and Courtland Sutton would step in and be a great wide receiver too immediately. So let's kind of talk about this from both sides, right? Both sides of the coin here. Starting with Denver. The Broncos would save a good amount of money if they were to trade Courtland Sutton away. And like I mentioned, they drafted Marvin Mims, so they're pretty loaded at wide receiver. So don't be surprised if Sean Payton and George Payton, the two guys calling the shots at Mile High, decide to save some money. Because if you look at the financial situation here, if Courtland Sutton is traded after June 1st, well, his base salary is $14 million. So that's what a team trading for Sutton would take on. But often you see teams eat that money just to get a trade to go through. But if they don't, Falcons would be on the hook for $14 million. The cap savings for Denver, $14 million. Dead cap hit 3.8 this year. 2024, 7.6. So about 10 or so-ish million dollars in dead cap, more like 11, but $14 million in cap savings might be pretty tempting for a team like Denver who, like I've mentioned, drafted a wide receiver. They've got Jerry Jeudy shooting up the ranks. Tim Patrick's coming off an ACL injury. They might like their wide receiver room and decide we can save some money and get some draft assets in the process. That could be a pretty good deal for both sides. Now, it's a tough contract for the Falcons to swallow, but it might be worth it because after Drake London, there's no clear direction in this room, right? All these guys are on one-year contracts, and I know that Fontenot can only put out so many fires in one offseason, but if you think Courtland Sutton, I'm talking to Terry here, can be a steal for a late or mid-early day 3 pick or something like that, you could have a good jump start on what Desmond Ridder has to work with for years to come if he truly is QB1. So vote down below in the comments section if you think the Falcons should trade for Courtland Sutton. We're going to look at his stats and everything like that, but just sort of a surface level here. Are you interested in Atlanta trading for the former SMU Pony? T for trade or P for pass? For me, it's a no-brainer. I am trading for Courtland Sutton if I'm the Falcons because all of a sudden Matt Collins slots down a spot. Scotty Miller's not your wide receiver 3. And Kadero Hodge and Frank Darby and Penny Hart aren't coming on the field in case something were to happen to one of the top guys. I know I'm being harsh, but also I'm being harsh right now because come September and October, November, we're all going to be saying the same things I'm saying right now. I've just got the stones to say it in May when it's a little mean, but it will be true. Like, if I'm wrong about this, so be it. But I'm not going to stop pretending to act like Matt Collins is a great wide receiver 2 for a team. He's a borderline wide receiver 3. He had a good season with the Raiders last year, and maybe he can continue that in 2023. But before that in his career, go look at his numbers. He very well could regress to that. Meanwhile, Courtland Sutton might not be a spectacular wide receiver 1, but he definitely can be a good wide receiver 2 with 829 yards last year for Denver. Now, yes, they had some difficulties finding the end zone, just 4 touchdowns the last 2 years, and it's been a slow-ish, or maybe like a nagging ACL recovery from 2020, but with 2023 being his 3rd year removed from that, there's a lot of positive signs that he is really out of the woods. Now, Courtland Sutton got a contract extension in November of 2021, so about 18 or so months ago. Since getting that extension, he has fallen off a little bit. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. 988 yards and 2 touchdowns in 22 games. That's not ideal. But when he has been healthy, he was a 1,000-yard receiver back in 2019. This is not me saying that Courtland Sutton is going to come in here and be an incredible wide receiver. It's me saying Courtland Sutton is better than the current wide receivers after Drake London, and I want to learn if Desmond Ridder is the guy or not. And I am one snap away from losing my mind because we're going to have Penny Hart running with the first-team offense, and that's not going to put a lot of butts in seats. And that's just the cold, hard truth here. So if Courtland Sutton can get back to his pre-ACL days, he certainly can be a 1,000-yard receiver. Now, a Broncos beat reporter, Cecil Lammey, had a really interesting quote that I think tweet and quote all at once. A really interesting tweet that might, persuade you if you're on the fence. I thought wide receiver Courtland Sutton looked explosive. No, that's not a typo. He was moving really well and had good bursts today, better than I've seen in some time. So if Sutton is on a redemption tour this season, he could be a great wide receiver too. I mean, he was a wide receiver 1 for that team back in 2019. So if you've got a borderline wide receiver 1 healthy again as your second wide receiver, this is the Falcons offense all of a sudden that sure has a big question mark at the most important position, the quarterback. But if it's not Desmond Ridder for years to come, whoever it is, they'll be stepping into an offense with Bijan Robinson in the backfield, Drake London and Courtland Sutton split out wide, and Kyle Pitts as your tight end. Like, whoever the quarterback is, with an easy schedule this year, they can motor this team to at least 7, 8, or 9 wins and have them in contention to host a playoff game. Now, before we get to the rest of today's show, speaking of Drake London, get your very own Drake London jersey when you go to chatsports.com/London. We're not going to be sending you on a trip across the pond, but you will be rocking the number 5 jersey. That link's in the comments and the description of today's video. So as cool as it is to still be rocking a Julio Jones or even a Roddy White jersey, time to turn the page a little bit. Get the next Julio Jones, the next Roddy White jersey with Drake London today using our link. Now, if I'm Denver, right, and I got to persuade Sean Payton and George Payton into doing this because it sounded like they were very close at one point to trading Sutton to the Baltimore Ravens. Ultimately, they did not get a deal done, and Denver was asking for a second. Maybe if they come down from that asking point, you can persuade them, Terry, with you already have Jerry Jeudy, the end of the year on a very high note. You have, by the way, the most expensive wide receiver room in the NFL next year, so good chance you're moving out from Courtland Sutton in 8 or so months anyway. You drafted Marvin Mims, like I said. You're getting Tim Patrick back. So you got those 3 wide receivers to help a team that wants to run the football this year after Russell Wilson's disastrous 2022 campaign, and you get to save $14 million. Those are really compelling reasons if you're Atlanta to persuade Denver into moving on from a great character and a great leader in that locker room, someone that Atlanta would be adding. So do the Broncos want to pay Courtland Sutton to be, I don't know, maybe a wide receiver 3? Like if Tim Patrick and Jerry Jeudy emerge themselves as the top 2 receivers, could you imagine a $14 million asset not getting the snap count that a $14 million receiver should get? Ultimately, maybe when training camp rolls around and Denver's got a good idea of the pecking order in the wide receiver room, they decide that Sutton is a lot more available than they initially thought. Now, if I'm Atlanta, or if I'm Denver and I got to persuade Atlanta, here's my sales pitch. You need a wide receiver too bad. Like, the Falcons can thank the Tennessee Titans for having a worse wide receiver room, because if not, Atlanta would be dead last. You have the cap space available, right? You can definitely get this deal to get through. So a money situation would not be a big hurdle for Atlanta to get over. And you get to properly evaluate Desmond Ridder. Like, I don't know if Atlanta just decided Ridder's the best answer for 2023 and will attack quarterback in 2024 if he's not the future franchise QB. But if you want to give the guy a fair shot, he definitely already has some good tools to work with Bijan and Pitts and London. But it could really get a full picture if you add Courtland Sutton so teams aren't zeroing in on London. All of a sudden, Desmond Ridder's trying to find an open receiver and there's no separation downfield. Because after Drake London, like even with Drake London, these aren't 2022 stats. These are career stats. Matt Collins, in his career, has amassed 1,440 yards. That's what you like to see out of a great season for a player. No one else has 1,000 yards in their career after Matt Collins. That is why I am standing here today telling you guys they should add another wide receiver. So what does it cost to get Courtland Sutton? I don't think Denver would be playing ball for a 4th-round pick right now. But if training camp rolls around and Marvin Mims is looking super good, Tim Patrick's looking 100%, and they decide, you know what, there's a good chance we're moving on from Courtland Sutton after this season anyway because we just drafted his replacement with Mims, maybe they'll take a 4th-round pick. Denver is a little bit short draft capital because they moved on from some picks to get Sean Payton. So I'm sure they'd be happy to get an early day 3 pick. And if you're Atlanta, you got a clear-cut wide receiver, too, that's hopefully turning the corner on an ACL injury, and it's not a super high cost. Like, if it was a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, I could see why you'd have some hesitancy. But a 4th-rounder, yeah, I think that's worthy of a flyer to see if Courtland Sutton can be a 1,000-yard receiver again, because how often do you find 1,000-yard receivers in the 4th round anyway? So would you accept this trade? If you were in charge and you're in Flowery Branch, are you making this deal happen? A for accept or D for decline? Personally, I'm doing it. Like, if I'm the Falcons, that seems like a great deal to me. You grab your wide receiver 2. You let Desmond Ridder cook. If Desmond Ridder turns out to not be the guy, well, whoever the quarterback is in 2023, if it's a rookie, or 2024, if it's a rookie, imagine how comfortable that rookie is going to be with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Courtland Sutton as their wide receivers. That's going to really help them come along if Ridder ends up not being the guy. And if Courtland Sutton turns out to be, unfortunately, a bit of a bust of a trade, you didn't put a whole lot of skin into it. It's just a 4th-round pick. Not saying those aren't, valuable, but it's not a day 2 pick at the very least. That's going to do it for us on today's show. Thank you all so much for tuning in, hanging out with producer Rolly and I. We will sign off, and we'll see everyone later.